Hello everyone, my name is JD.
And this is Logan.
And this is the WireTap, brought to you by the Conservative Wire. We've been off all weekend, and a lot has happened, obviously, since then. You had Trump tweet something, and the media all called him a racist. And, there was a shooting last night in California. And we'll get to that here later in the episode. But we want to start off with something that happened on Friday. And it was late Friday night, and this is from the New York Times. The Supreme Court lets Trump proceed on the border wall, and it says that the SCOTUS gave President Trump a victory in his fight for a wall along the Mexican border by allowing the administration to use $2.5 billion in Pentagon money for the construction. In a 5-4 ruling, the court overturned an appellate decision and said that the administration could tap the money while litigation over the matter proceeds. But that will most likely take many months or longer, allowing Mr. Trump to move ahead before the case returns to the Supreme Court after further proceedings in the appeals, blah, 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 blah. So, this is immediately after this. Of course, everyone said that Mr. Trump was circumventing Congress and that it was a violation of the separation of powers, and what he's doing is unconstitutional and it's illegal, gosh darn it, and this is grounds for impeachment. Meanwhile,
they said that about his tweets.
Yeah, I mean, they said that about everything. The impeachment and the word racist have no meaning anymore because they're so watered down.
Unconstitutional?
Yeah, unconstitutional. And we need to impeach. And he's a racist and everything. If you want to see more about racism, check out our last episode. But it's just mind-boggling that this is from the Supreme Court of the United States. This isn't executive fiat. This isn't an executive order. This is from the SCOTUS.
No, but he's going around Congress, you see, by using the checks and balances that have been laid out in the Constitution. He's clearly bypassing everything, you see.
See, sometimes things don't require Congress. Sometimes, because these Congress, the officials in Congress and our legislators, especially on the left, feel as though that they have a hand in everything that goes on in the United States government. They truly feel that they have a hand in everything, and that anything that occurs has to go through them.
They did it with the census.
Yeah, they did it with the census, and they cried and complained about that, and they fell back on their tried and true defense. He's a racist for this, and that he circumvented Congress whenever, really, I don't know whose idea it was. I don't know if it was Barr's. Whoever it was, I mean, it was actually
pretty good idea.
I mean, it was pretty brilliant tactic and strategy to just go ahead and use the numbers that are already given to the executive branch that they've had for years and years. Look at their numbers from Social Security, from
healthcare,
labor and healthcare and any sort of executive bureaucracy, education, and look to see how many people are citizens, how many are not, how many are illegal, excluding residents and all that kind of stuff.
I think they
residents.
said actually doing that, and if it's done correctly, could be more accurate than a regular
census, because the claim that the citizens question has never been on the census is just flat out false. You can go and you can look at I think it's is it Center for Immigration Studies, I think, that has a has an article, has a write-up, a report on these are the years and these are the times as to when this question has been on the census, and it's been on many, many years. And I think for I think it was 1900 and 1950. I mean, it was a good 50, 60 years that question was on the census. I mean, 5 or 6 censuses. And it was every 10 years.
It was even during that time that the borders were shut.
Yeah.
Borders weren't even open. Immigration wasn't allowed.
But you've had this question so many times, and then it moved away from the census because they felt that they were getting a lot more inaccurate results because the census had grown so long. So what they did is they decided to chop the census, chop it in half, so to speak, and then they would have a long-form version called the American Community Survey, which is given out at random to a smaller sect of people. And it's a lengthy document that you fill out. I've filled one out myself, and because they felt that they were getting inaccurate questions on the census, but it has that question on the ACS. So the argument that it's never been on the census is just flat out false. There's no reason it can't be on the census, and as we discussed before, really the reason why this didn't go through is just because Roberts didn't, like the reasoning. They didn't like the reasoning. They thought that they needed a better and more explained reason. But, it's been on there before. I don't really understand why, but that's just their reasoning. And they loved the Supreme Court then.
Yeah.
They loved the Supreme Court with Obamacare.
John Roberts was the greatest thing on the Obamacare.
Oh, yeah, on Obamacare. They managed the Bush-appointed Roberts. They flipped him on Obamacare, and they flipped him on government-provided health care. They managed to turn his mind on that based off of what the decisions were from the Supreme Court and the things that they did with, the tax for not getting the government-provided health care, or rather the penalty is a tax, which wasn't in the law to begin with. That was the only way that could even be legal. You can't just penalize somebody for not buying your program, so they wrote it up as a tax, which is still bullcrap. It's still bullcrap, but that's the only way that it could even loosely be legal. But they loved the Supreme Court with the gay marriage decision, and God, it was like 2014, wasn't it? 2014. But they loved it then. So it's a love-hate relationship, and it goes both ways. Conservatives love and hate the Supreme Court depending on how they rule. But whenever we do it, we expect logical reasoning as to how they get to their decisions, and we look at how they get to their reasoning, and then we determine whether or not, based off their reasoning, that's even a logical conclusion. And a lot of times the left is just, this supports a policy position that we support, or this does not, and that's how they determine what they like and what they don't like about the Supreme Court. And if there's any doubt in your mind that the Supreme Court is subject to bias, is subject to influence from personal political opinion, look at how much the left freaked out about Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. If there's any doubt in your mind, they say, conservatives were trying to take over the Supreme Court. Have you ever seen how much they freak out about it? And what does that tell you about them? Does nobody remember FDR and court packing and what he tried to do?
All political parties try it. Yeah, you're going to appoint a more conservative-leaning judge. A Republican president is going to appoint that, and I expect the same from the left. It just makes no sense.
Yeah. So that happened on Friday. So I saw something, I don't know how accurate it is, but just estimating, I guess. This should provide enough funding for
100 miles,
like 100 miles of,
plus or minus,
of the wall. So I'm not sure how accurate that is. I assume probably based off of what was being asked for before, because Trump was only asking for like $5 billion, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much that was supposed to build, but he's getting half. He's getting half of that. So I assume that was only maybe for 200. But so just taking that estimate, I saw from, I think it was the Daily Caller, that it was going to be about 100 miles of border wall that was going to be constructed with this money from the Pentagon, which I mean, it's already money that's in the executive branch, you know?
I mean, essentially the case here was whether or not I think that the southern border classified as defense.
Like a threat.
Yeah, as a threat. To allocate that money to it.
I guess. I mean, the left can't... I mean, they hemorrhage over the amount that we spend for defense all the time, and they talk about how we need to decrease our spending on defense, and we have the largest military in the world already, so why do we need to keep spending on it like this? And, you know, suddenly they become fiscal conservatives if it's on, I don't know, defending the nation, but, you know, now it's
climate change.
You know, I mean, they can't believe that he would ever spend it on anything other than our military operations around the world. They just can't believe it. But any other time, they wouldn't mind if the Department of Defense shut down. But pivoting from this, as we mentioned before, there was a shooting last night, and this is all still ongoing as of the time of recording here on Monday, the day after. And a gunman they've identified as a 19-year-old. I'm not going to do the whole thing with his name, his picture, anything like that. I don't want to give him any notoriety. This is from ABC, and this shooting occurred at the Gilroy Garlic Festival in the city of Gilroy, 80 miles southeast of San Francisco. And according to what there is right now, there's 3 people who were killed in this incident and more than a dozen others who were injured. Reports on injuries are always kind of flexible. I've seen like 13, 15. So somewhere in there was people injured. One of those who have been confirmed to be dead is a 6-year-old boy who was shot amongst all this. So, you know, obviously thoughts and prayers with those who are affected by this. But right after this, what we see so many times is the left and how they never fail to take the opportunity to talk about gun control. And I wasn't even gonna make a video about any of this because, you know, I kind of started looking at news last night and seeing what happened over the weekend whenever I was just totally disconnected. And, you know, I see this, and I wasn't going to do anything with it. I didn't want to even touch it. But there's a piece from the Washington Post from this morning that has all of the Democratic candidates and lawmakers and everything and their responses to this. And it just makes my blood boil sometimes how they just cannot just shut up.
So this happened yesterday?
This happened yesterday night at 6 o'clock, like just after 6 o'clock.
So we're not even a full, 12, 15 hours later, and they've already made these statements?
We're maybe 8, as of time of recording, we're like 19 hours after this. And this is from this morning from the Washington Post. I don't know.
So the article came out.
The time is from 6:55 this morning. So all of this probably was from last night as this was going on. These statements and everything were probably from last night. Because, this is from 6:55 Eastern. So
I don't even understand how you could make statements like that. It just happened, and you're already making these statements.
And I mean, let's go ahead and read some of these. I wasn't going to do like these people do. I wasn't going to make a video and, like, in response to this and be like, but, you know, despite this, look at these, you know, gun control statistics and why it doesn't work. I wasn't even going to do that. I wasn't even going to touch it. And I'm really even still not. I'm just wanting to look at what these people said. And this is, I think, first up is Kamala Harris. She tweeted out, a lot of these are actually tweets from them. I think Joe Biden, I don't know if Joe Biden actually had a statement he released. But Kamala Harris, first, says, "Simply horrific. I'm grateful to the first responders who were on the scene in Gilroy, and my thoughts are with that community tonight, not prayers. Our country has a gun violence epidemic that we cannot tolerate." And good God, right here, paragraph right after this. Among politicians and activists, the Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting provoked a familiar cycle of thoughts and prayers and rejections of thoughts and prayers, which, that's chic, that's in now, is the whole thoughts and prayers aren't enough anymore. Thoughts and prayers aren't enough. I never thought that I'd see the day to where somebody, wishing their thoughts and prayers with people who suffer a horrific event are shouted down.
Yeah.
Those who wish that are shouted down and told how terrible of people they are. Julian Castro.
Wait a minute. Kamala, her freaking state has some of the largest gun violence events in them. Why doesn't she do anything? She's a state senator.
Yeah. This is her state. Kamala Harris is the senator from California. And
propose a bill.
Let's totally honest here. California has some of the strictest gun laws in the union. I don't know who's stricter, California or New York.
It's a good toss-up between which one's more strict.
It's a solid toss-up. They're in the same league. Julian Castro said, "Thoughts and prayers aren't enough. We must do more to prevent these tragic attacks."
I don't care. He's not going to win.
Joe Biden, he wrote on Twitter, he said, "This violence is not normal. How many more families will have to lose a loved one before we fix our broken gun laws? We must take action, starting with real reform. Our thoughts are with everyone in Gilroy this evening. Enough is enough." And it's actually kind of interesting how they always say our thoughts and not our prayers, which is why I pointed that out just a minute ago with Kamala Harris. And honest to God, makes me wonder if they don't purposely leave that off. Because thoughts and prayers is kind of like the whole phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And it, honest to God, makes me wonder if they don't purposely leave that off because some people might find that offensive.
Yeah,
I would not doubt that they do not leave that off for that purpose.
Because if thoughts and prayers aren't enough, why are thoughts enough in those statements?
Yeah, why even wish your thoughts if thoughts and prayers aren't enough?
And why didn't Joe do anything while he was sitting in the White House for 8 years with Obama?
Yeah.
You're the Vice President of the United States. Do you have no pull?
He
was just a front man.
Like the former vice president, most of the candidates this year have pledged bans on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines while vowing to take on the National Rifle Association's influence in Congress. These people, I honestly don't know what they think that the NRA does. I don't know what kind of pull they think that the NRA actually has in Congress, but they've shown time and time again that they legitimately think that the NRA is the puppet master behind the whole GOP. And if you can criticize how much power the NRA has in Congress, and that's fair, but you also have to recognize Planned Parenthood. And that Planned Parenthood spends more money and donates more money than the NRA.
It's true.
You have, if you're going to attack the NRA, you also have to recognize that Planned Parenthood has just as big an influence and just as big,
if not bigger,
of a hold
on the Democrat
Party. If not
Party.
bigger, on the Democrat Party. If you're going to criticize the NRA, okay, that's fine, but you have to be fair. And we all know that, good God, even mentioning anything derogatory about Planned Parenthood is heresy to these people. Harris also promised executive action within her first 100 days in office if Congress fails to pass comprehensive gun legislation. Along with aforementioned bans, her package also includes universal background checks, which we already have. I don't know how much more universal they can without leaving the solar system. Closing the boyfriend... I've never heard of this one before. Closing the boyfriend loophole to make it more difficult for people convicted of domestic abuse to buy guns. I've never heard of that before. And honestly,
are you allowed to buy firearms?
I honestly don't know. I don't know how all that works, but it seems to me as big of a non-issue as the gun show loophole. Considering how less than 1% of any firearms across America are gotten from gun shows anyway. Seems to me as big of a non-issue. Just another instance to fearmonger a little bit. And repealing gun manufacturers' immunity to lawsuits related to shootings, among other things. So, they're removing the immunity that gun manufacturers have to lawsuits related to their products. So what that will allow people to now do is file lawsuits against Winchester, against Browning, against Remington, against Ruger. They're going to be able to file lawsuits against these gun manufacturers for actions taken with their product. And I don't know how that even works, because with cars, we've already settled this. We don't sue Ford. We don't sue Chevrolet or GMC or Dodge for people plowing into crowds. We didn't do that with Charlottesville, did we? Whenever that person plowed their car into the crowd of people. We don't do that whenever people run other people over, or are drunk driving and their car hits another car and kills somebody else. That falls on the individual.
We're going to sue Budweiser now.
I mean, I just don't... How are you...
And what...
How does that even work? How can you do that?
What surprises me the most with this is Kamala Harris always... all she has to run on is her record as an attorney. And now we're going to be blaming the product instead of the person. We're shifting the blame to
the
person that commits the crime.
Corporations instead of the individuals. I mean, that's ultimately what this is we're shifting the blame. And I just don't know how you can even do that. Because, let's be honest here, the gun is doing what it's intended to do. It's intended to propel a bullet. But what circumstance that bullet is being propelled and to whom determines the motivations and the circumstances behind it. Is it an act of self-defense? Is it hunting? Are you shooting an animal for hunting purposes? Or are you committing murder? That's the individual. The gun fires the bullet regardless of anything. If you pull the trigger, the bullet will come out. It doesn't care what it's pointing at, because that's its operation. That is what it's mechanically designed to do. It requires cognition and a cognitive thinking person to take it and aim it and pull that trigger. And the person who uses that device, knowing what it does, knowing that it kills things, or, can be used for recreational target shooting purposes, but knowing what it does, the responsibility falls on that person, for what happens with that gun.
At that point, are we going to have to release every single murderer in jail? Because it wasn't them that killed that person.
Yeah, honestly...
It was the gun.
At that point, it's the gun's fault. It's not the person. It was the gun. It was the gun who made them do that. It was the gun who... God, we didn't even touch on this. The death penalty that Barr is now going to reinstitute federally for, he already has 5, at least this time of recording, 5 lined up starting in December for people who've committed heinous crimes and, done these things. One of them, I think, slit a little girl's throat, cut her throat and killed her, and then I think killed her grandmother or something like that. Just on memory, that might be incorrect. But, I mean, these people have done horrible things. What? I mean, should they be released too? Because it was the gun or it was the knife that they had that made them do it.
Has a mind of its own.
But with that, we want to thank you guys for joining us on this edition of the WireTap. Make sure you guys hit like, subscribe. We are on SoundCloud, actually. We're going to stick with SoundCloud. There was some limbo with that, and we'll discuss that a little more in our next episode. But we just want to thank you guys so much for giving us, watching us here and supporting what we do. You can follow us on Twitter at the CWire, capital T-C and W, at the CWire. And as we said, make sure you subscribe, you like, you leave us comments on things that you want us to do, you want to see us talk about, and just interact with us. We really like whenever people interact with our content and the things that we do, and it's really fun, and this has been really fun so far. So we hope that you guys are liking the shorter format. Talk to us about that, anything that you want. So with that, for Logan, and I'm JD, and this has been the WireTap. We will see you guys in our next episode.